That was the reply of a Nazi. I suppose the Jews fighting for their lives in the Warsaw Ghetto could have been dismissed as militants. The Israeli Foreign Minister, Tzipi Livni, asserts that her government will have no dealings with Hamas because they're terrorists. Tzipi Livni's father was Eitan Livni, Chief Operations Officer of the terrorist Irgun Tzvi Leumi, who organised the blowing up of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, in which 91 victims were killed, including 4 Jews. Israel was born out of Jewish terrorism. Jewish terrorists hanged 2 British sergeants and booby-trapped their corpses. Irgun, together with the terrorist Stern Gang, massacred 254 Palestinians in 1948 in the village of Deir Yassin. Today, the present Israeli government indicate that they will be willing, in circumstances acceptable to them, to negotiate with the Palestinian President Abbas of Fatah. It's too late for that, Madam Deputy Speaker. They could have negotiated with Fatah's previous leader, Yasser Arafat, who was a friend of mine. Instead, they besieged him in a bunker in Ramallah, where I visited him. It's because of the failings of Fatah since Arafat's death that Hamas won the election, the Palestinian election in 2006. Hamas is a deeply nasty organisation, but it was democratically elected, and it is the only game in town. The boycotting of Hamas, including by our own government, has been a culpable error from which dreadful consequences have followed. The great Israeli Foreign Minister Abba Eban, with whom I campaigned for peace on many platforms, said, "You make peace by talking to your enemies." However many Palestinians the Israelis murder in Gaza, they cannot solve this existential problem by military means. Whenever and however the fighting ends, there will still be 1.5 million Palestinians in Gaza and 2.5 million more Palestinians in the West Bank, who are treated like dirt by the Israelis, with hundreds of roadblocks and with the ghastly denizens of the illegal Jewish settlements harassing them as well. The time will come, not so long from now, when they will outnumber the Jewish population in Israel. It's time for our government to make clear to the Israeli government that its conduct and policies are unacceptable and to impose a total arms ban on Israel. It is time for peace, but real peace, not the solution by conquest, which is the Israelis' real goal, but which is impossible for them to achieve. They're not simply war criminals, they're fools.
And in an unusually strong terms, the International Red Cross today criticised Israel after finding several starving children next to the corpses of their mothers in a house just meters away from an Israeli military position. The ICRC chief in Gaza has accused the Israelis of breaching international humanitarian law in what he called a shocking incident. In the devastated Zaytun neighbourhood, the Red Cross found several starving children too weak to stand up. Israel has banned international journalists from entering Gaza, but our diplomatic correspondent Jonathan Rugman reports now from the Israel-Gaza border.
This was one of 4 starving Palestinian children the ICRC accuses Israel of deliberately abandoning. For 4 days, ambulances tried to reach them, but the Israeli army said no. And when medics were allowed in, the children were found sitting among the corpses of at least a dozen people, including their own mothers.
We went into homes and found the injured and the living all in the same house. They had been there for more than 4 days. Of course, the bodies were decomposed.
And another disturbing development this evening. In Gaza City's northern area of Jabalia, paramedics report finding bodies that have apparently been run over by Israeli army tanks. During a lull in the fighting, Palestinian medics brought the dead and wounded to hospital. In one particularly gruesome incident, the remains of a child baby were recovered.
We found bodies that the tanks drove over. The medics checked the bodies and found damage at the cellular level and bodies The baby girl, aged 5 months, she was dead for more than 2 days.
Well, earlier I spoke to Katerina Ritz of the International Red Cross. She's head of mission here in Jerusalem. I asked her if she believed Israel no longer respects the neutrality of the International Red Cross.
Let's say they don't trust the neutrality of the humanitarian world, and they believe, they say, okay, we know, we trust you, but okay, there could be somebody in your car which you can't really tell us that somebody's there.
Now, when your team entered that area in Zaytun, what did they find?
The first, what they found is roadblocks and earth, mud walls covering, blocking the road, so we could not bring in the ambulances. The team had to walk for 1.5 kilometers or 1 kilometer, and then they started to see some dead bodies of women in front of doors. They went in the first house, they found dead bodies. They went into a second house, they found survivors. So this went on. They found in one house a woman, a mother, dead on the floor, and 2 children next to her, completely weakened because they hadn't had any food and water. They couldn't hardly stand on their own leg. And the team went through 10 houses and found like at least 18 wounded. They evacuated 12 weak civilians, but not wounded, and 4 children.
But effectively, you're finding, your teams in Gaza City are finding starving children sitting next to their dead mothers.
That's the situation they have, or that was the situation which was presented last night, and I think this was really shocking to see this.
What did the Israeli army do? Did they intervene in any way? Did they hinder your teams?
So what happened is, because they tried to ask to remove the roadblocks, so there was no reaction to this.
Israeli roadblocks?
Exactly. The road, the earth mount from the Israeli to open the road so the ambulances can arrive. So this was not done, and what they went is to get a donkey cart. So they brought the donkey cart, and then with this they evacuated the people as much as possible, the wounded, the children, and 2 dead bodies, and brought out them through this to the 4 ambulances which were with them.
So Israeli soldiers were watching this, they were preventing ambulances from going in, and they were watching the ICRC remove injured people, starving children on a donkey cart.
Yes, that's what happened last night, yeah.
Well, I'm joined now by the Israeli Prime Minister spokesman, Mark Regev. Mr. Regev, thanks for being with us tonight.
Pleasure.
Can you explain to people why on earth Israeli Defence Forces wish to interfere and prevent the Red Cross reaching dead and wounded civilians?
We have no such intention. Ultimately, we will do what we can, what needs to be done, to work with humanitarian organisations like the Red Cross.
Mr. Regev, for 3 days the Red Cross couldn't get to a situation where there were starving children sitting next to the corpses of their mothers. A lot of our viewers will be saying, in the name of humanity, what kind of government allows its soldiers to stop the RC getting to those people?
First of all, we have to investigate what happened. We have to make sure lines of communication are open and working, that the telephones are working. We have to make sure.
Mr. Regev, I think you know what happened. Your soldiers were there, they were close to this position. The Red Cross are not in the business of making this
I know,
up.
and we take the Red Cross very seriously, and that's why we're investigating. But I think you should also be aware that Hamas is playing the game of atrocity propaganda.
I'm not talking about Hamas, I'm talking about your soldiers preventing the Red Cross. I'm inviting you, Mr. Regev, to apologise to the Red Cross for this.
We want to work with the Red Cross. We see them as playing an important role. We have a good relationship with them. We want to continue that relationship. There's a difficult combat situation, as you know, in Gaza. In spite of the difficulties, we want to work with the Red Cross and help them do their job.
Mr. Regev, the Red Cross had to walk 1 kilometre to reach these people. Your soldiers prevented them getting their ambulances in. Your soldiers forced the Red Cross to get these people out, starving children, on a donkey cart. In the name of humanity, what is Israel doing?